Listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is June the 26th, 177th day of the year. 188 days remain of the year's over with. Let's talk about holidays and observances. It's National Canoe Day, National Drug Day, World Refrigeration Day, National Handshake Day, National Beautician's Day, National Chocolate Pudding Day, National Stitch Day. My voice keeps fading. We're talking about that mischievous extraterrestrial friend, embodies chaos with a heartwarming twist. National Bomb Pop Day, National Coconut Day, National Barcode Day, and National Day in support of victims of torture, National Storage Week, Deaf Blind Awareness Week, Insect Week, Rabbit Week, English Wine Week, National Lightning Safety Awareness Week, Windjammer Days, Islamic New Year, famous people born in the state, Ariana Grande, Aubrey Plaza, Nick Offerman, Paul Thomas Anderson, Michael Vick, Mr. Dog, and Shannon Sharp. All right, let's see what we got in the news. There's always something going on. Pentagon officials highlight the effectiveness of U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Trump talked about the complete obliteration. Israel, Iran, and U.S. agree on Trump's Iran strikes. AOC has styled herself as the feisty girl from the Bronx, but she actually grew up in Westchester, good distance from Bronx. Florida lawmakers forced to evacuate her office after sharing personal medical crisis. And pro-abortion activists and a number of threats. Congresswoman Kat Kamick, Republican of Florida, that she's been a repeat victim of the threats following an exclusive with the Wall Street Journal when she spoke about an expelled pregnancy in May of last year. Indispensable Biden aid is gets the House Oversight probe into Biden's mental decline. He was Anthony Bernal, the indispensable Biden aide, said to be Joe Biden's work husband. Former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says there's been a lot of exaggeration over the Mamdani fears. He is a socialist who has won the primary for mayor of New York. Beat Cuomo. I suspect my dog could have beat Cuomo. The breadcrumb trail, figuratively speaking, led authorities to the murder of Suzanne Morphew. The husband has been accused. This 5-year-old Colorado murder mystery is now unraveled. Body was found in 2023 containing tranquilizer drugs that he used on his deer farm. So he was indicted Friday on the first-degree murder charge in the death of his wife. But missed in May of 2020, wasn't found until September 2023. Raising Cane has opened 3 new locations this week, with dozens more planned by the end of the year. It's got an ambitious growth strategy going on. Never set foot in that. Been a lot of them. Lauren Chance says his ex is attending her wedding to Jeff Bezos. And let's see. Democrats run to the Blue Sky block button as J.D. Vance trolls them on their own turf for a solid week. He recently joined Blue Sky while quipping he heard the Democratic-dominated platform is for common sense political discussion and analysis. I don't know how you find that with the Democrats, but go figure. Indiana governor freezes college tuition, citing a broken system in need of reform. Mike Braun successfully pushes for historic tuition freeze. As post-secondary education costs actually surpass health care. According to Liz Peek, the New York socialist nightmare is just beginning. After a shocking Democratic primary win in New York City this week, Zohran Mamdani, his anti-Israel stance and promised socialist policies could still be defeated in November. Let's see. A Jesus figure formed in the clouds after a mass in Naga City had the worshippers absolutely stunned. According to Hannity, the Democrats' attempt to paint Trump as a warmonger could be further from the truth. He's actually brought about peace in the Middle East at the moment. Gavin Newsom's $9 gas nightmare looms over the Golden State. They just raised gas taxes again. Got to take care of all the undocumented, Fitness icon Denise Austin is strutting her stuff in a bikini in the sunny south of France while on vacation. NFL stars bought the jersey of the WNBA player who defended Caitlin Clark in a scuffle on the court. Let's see, is there anything else? Economists take closer looks at the big beautiful bill, and the White House is not happy about it. Former President Bill Clinton backs the socialist candidate in New York City. Surprise, surprise, surprise. DOJ has sued Minnesota, offering illegal immigrants college tuition benefits that they deny to Americans. Got to educate those undocumented, It's like our congresswoman here says, she ain't got time for the problems of disabled veterans. She's got all the undocumented immigrants to take care of, using taxpayer money. Now, if she wanted to dip into her own pocket and pay for all the stuff she's doing, that'd be one thing. But oh no. And let's see. Depot buyers are turning to the bank of mom and dad to get their part of the American dream. Let the parents underwrite the purchasing their own homes. Freak umbrella accident left a lifeguard impaled on the Jersey Shore. I mean, that's not good. One minute you're enjoying the breeze under an umbrella, next minute the umbrella's in you. And let's not forget Prime Days are coming up. Let's see. Maybe we'll go to our next story. There we go. There was at Asbury Park's 3rd Avenue beach. First responders were called to the Jersey Shore for reports a young woman was trapped by a beach umbrella. They found her lying on the ground. The umbrella staked through her left shoulder and sticking out the back of her arm by about a foot. They cut the umbrella stake off so they could transport it to the hospital. Also, the Metcalf killing suspect is facing white supremacy after a murder indictment. Carmelo Anthony faces a first-degree murder charge for stabbing Austin Metcalf to death during an April track meet, and he claims the reason he's been indicted was white supremacy. The mere fact he stabbed somebody is irrelevant. Family of an Israeli hostage has urged Trump to leverage the recent ceasefire to get the release of all the hostages. Carrie Lake has told Congress that the CCP may control taxpayer-funded broadcast. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez have arrived in Venice for the beginning of the wedding festivities. Americans are listening to Fox News as the network crushes the rivals during the Iran strike coverage. Well, in continuing our discussion of UFOs, let's go to Washington, D.C., July 1952. The Washington, D.C. incident in 52 remains one of the most publicized and controversial events in the history of UFOs. A series of events took place over several consecutive nights, attracting the attention of media, the public, and government authorities. At that time, the Cold War was at its peak, and the fear of a technologically advanced attack from the Soviet Union was omnipresent in the minds of Americans. In this context of tension and suspicion, radar at the Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base began to detect unidentified flying objects moving at speeds with maneuvers that exceeded the capabilities of any aircraft at that time. The radar observations, corroborated by visual testimonies from pilots and citizens, triggered a series of reactions ranging from questioning to sheer out panic. Objects were described as being luminous and capable of sudden movements at high speed, defied the laws of physics as they were known at that time. Our government, under pressure to clarify the situation, had to publicly intervene to try to calm the population and demystify the observations. This incident not only marked the annals of encounters with UFOs, but also influenced aviation policy and management of classified information concerning unidentified aerial phenomena. Of course, the immediate suggestion was aerial balloons. Somebody released dozens of aerial balloons. Over several nights, unidentified flying objects were observed in the sky of Washington, D.C., causing an unprecedented wave of panic and media interest. The most notable observation took place on the night of July 19th, 1952. About midnight, radars at the Washington National Airport, which is today Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, began to detect objects moving at speeds with maneuvers that far exceeded the capabilities of any known aircraft at the time. They appeared sporadically on the screen, sometimes disappearing and reappeared elsewhere. Air traffic controllers, intrigued and worried, observed these radar anomalies for hours. The objects seemed capable of remaining stationary and then suddenly accelerating to supersonic speed. Behaviors not associated with any conventional aircraft at the time. Visually, witnesses on the ground and surrounding planes describe the objects as oval or circular in shape. Bright lights, often white in color, sometimes with shades of blue or red. The lights didn't blink like those of ordinary planes, but they seemed to pulse or even vary in intensity. The observation reached a peak of intensity when several of the objects were seen simultaneously at different locations in the Washington, D.C. sky. Pilots flying nearby were contacted by air traffic controllers, and some of them visually confirmed the presence of these mysterious objects. One pilot even reported one of the objects approached his plane before it moved away at an incredible speed. Weather conditions during these observations were clear with only a few clouds, which eliminates the possibility the observed objects were weather phenomena, such as lenticular clouds or atmospheric mirages. Visibility was very good, which allowed many witnesses on the ground to clearly see these objects in the sky. This incident lasted several nights. Similar observations made on subsequent nights. Each time the objects mainly appeared between midnight and dawn, maximizing the number of witnesses due to the darkness and clarity of the sky. In summary, the Washington, D.C. incident of 1952 was characterized by multiple observations of unidentified flying objects. Excuse me. Detected both by radar and visually, behaving in a manner that didn't correspond to known aircraft or natural phenomena of the type. These observations were accompanied by clear weather conditions, which strengthens the credibility of the visual testimonies. Now, the testimonies about this event came from several credible sources, including air traffic controllers, pilots, and even members of the police. One of the first witnesses was Edward Nugent, air traffic controller at Washington National Airport. He observed 7 strange objects on his radar moving in a restricted airspace. These objects didn't conform to the movements or speeds of conventional aircraft. And he described the objects as being hovering and moving at incredible speeds like nothing I've ever seen before. Terry Barnes, another air traffic controller, corroborated Nugent's observation. He reported the objects disappeared and reappeared on the radar screen, changed direction with astounding agility. He noted the objects sometimes seemed to follow commercial planes, which caused concern, of course, among the pilots. One of the pilots, Captain S.C. Casey Pierman, flying for Capital Airlines, was a key witness to this incident. While he was in flight, he observed 6 bright objects moving at high speed. He described the lights as being white and bright and moving at a speed he estimated to be much faster than any plane he'd ever seen. He followed the objects for about 14 minutes before he lost sight of them. Now, the objects weren't limited to aviation. The observations weren't limited to aviation professionals. Washington, D.C. police officer named John Baxter reported seeing objects similar to those described by air traffic controllers and pilots. He saw several lights moving at high speed in the night sky, changing direction abruptly and without any apparent noise. Now, these testimonies, among others, contributed to the magnitude of the Washington, D.C. incident. Descriptions of the object's movement, their ability to change direction and quickly disappear from radar, as well as the consistency of reports from different professional witnesses, fueled debates and speculations about the nature of these objects for decades. Incidents not only captivated the public, but also drew the attention of military and government authorities, leading to more in-depth investigations into unidentified flying objects. Now, the phenomenon has triggered a series of official investigations conducted by various American government agencies, including the Air Force. Everything began when a radar at Washington National Airport detected several unidentified objects in the night sky. These observations were confirmed by the radars in the region. Faced with an increasing number of reports and media pressure, the Air Force launched an official investigation to determine the nature and origin of these objects. Initial reactions to the military were to rationalize the observations as natural phenomena in radar eras. But the testimonies of civilian and military pilots who reported seeing flying objects with extraordinary characteristics complicated that explanation. Now, the investigation was primarily conducted by Project Blue Book, Air Force initiative dedicated to the study of UFOs. The investigators examined radar data, collected testimonies, and analyzed weather conditions during the incidents. They also questioned air traffic controllers and eyewitnesses. And one of the key aspects of the investigation was the analysis of radar recordings. Air Force radar experts attempted to determine if the signals could be attributed to atmospheric anomalies such as temperature inversions that could reflect radar signals to the ground and create echoes of false objects. However, this theory didn't fully match the rapid movement and flight formations reported by the eyewitnesses. Testimonies of the pilots were particularly disturbing for the investigators. Several experienced pilots described objects moving at incredible speeds, performing maneuvers that defied the laws of physics as we knew them at the time. These descriptions added a level of credibility to the reports, putting investigators under pressure to provide some kind of plausible explanation that didn't get laughed out of the room. Faced with the inability to provide a definitive explanation and the fear of public panic, the Air Force organized a press conference. Major General John Samford, then Director of Air Force Intelligence, stated that the majority of UFO sightings could be explained by conventional phenomena. But then he went on to admit that some cases did remain unresolved. In conclusion of the investigation, the final report of the Blue Book Project on this incident attributed most of the observations to radar errors and misinterpreted weather phenomena. However, this conclusion didn't satisfy all observers, and the Washington, D.C. incident remains a subject of debate and speculation among ufologists and skeptics alike. Now, the incident had a lasting impact on the management of UFO observations by the American government, leading to more structured policies and ongoing monitoring of UFO reports by specialized agencies. One of the first theories put forward was that of temperature inversions, of course. When in doubt, it's either a weather balloon or temperature inversion. According to this hypothesis, particular weather conditions could have caused the radar anomalies, creating echoes of false objects. Skeptics and some meteorologists argue that temperature inversions, which involve a layer of warm air over a colder one, can reflect radar waves in unusual ways, creating illusions of objects moving in the sky. But this explanation does not take into account the consistent visual testimonies of pilots and air traffic controllers who reported seeing lights moving intelligently and coordinated in the sky. Well, the popular theory is that of extraterrestrial intervention. This hypothesis is supported by many ufologists who argue that the movement and maneuvering capabilities of the observed objects don't correspond to any known technology of the time. And moreover, the fact that these objects could appear and disappear quickly, change directions at high speed, and execute tight turns without slowing down suggests some technology far beyond the human capabilities at the time. Some conspiracy theories suggest the incident could be linked to secret experiments by the American government. They speculate the United States might have been testing prototypes of advanced aircraft or drones, and the Washington incident could have been a staged event to assess public and defense system reactions to a known aerial intrusion. Theory is often reinforced by the fact the military initially downplayed the events before officially acknowledging, which indicated an attempt at concealment. Well, duh. Finally, there are those who believe that the incident could be attributed to psychological phenomena. According to this view, the collective fear of alien invasion fueled by the media and popular culture of the time could have led to a kind of mass hysteria where witnesses were predisposed to interpret ordinary phenomena as extraordinary. Now, this theory is often used to explain why so many people reported similar observations despite the absence of concrete physical evidence. The variety of explanations offered reflect the complexity of the incident and the mystery that continues to surround it, which of course makes it a fascinating case study for those interested in unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, from Washington, D.C., let's go to November 13th, 1952, Desert Center, California, what's known as the Adamski incident. Now, George Adamski, for those who are not familiar with him, is a restaurateur and amateur philosopher passionate about astronomy, claimed to have encountered an extraterrestrial spaceship and its occupant in the California desert near Desert Center. Now, before this event, he had already made a name for himself in UFO circles for his photographs of what he claimed to be spaceships. November 13th, 1952. Accompanied by several witnesses, he went into the desert where he said he observed a large cigar-shaped ship. According to his account, a small saucer-shaped ship detached itself from the ladder and landed not far from him. Adamski left his friends at a distance and approached the craft alone, where he allegedly met a being he described as being of human appearance, who allegedly came from Venus. The entity, named Orthon, allegedly communicated with Adamski telepathically, sharing messages of peace and warning against the dangers of the nuclear age. This incident catapulted Adamski to the stature of an iconic figure in UFO communities and sparked a lively debate about the veracity of his claims. That day, Adamski, accompanied by several witnesses, was in the desert near Mount Palomar, where he ran a small restaurant and amateur observatory. The observation took place in the early afternoon under clear and sunny sky, which offered perfect visibility. According to Adamski and his friends, the UFO initially appeared at a considerable distance, resembling a bright point in the sky. Gradually it approached, allowing for more detailed observation. Adamski described the UFO as having the shape of a classic saucer with a transparent dome on top. The object measured about 10 meters in diameter, he said, and was composed of what seemed to be a shiny metal, which emitted a soft glow. The object stabilized at a short distance from the ground, floating without any perceptible noise, which of course intrigued Adamski and his friends. They noted the UFO produced no visible disturbance of the air or sand beneath it, suggesting advanced levitation or anti-gravity technology. Then Adamski used his telescope to take several photographs of the UFO, which showed a disc-shaped object with precise details such as portholes or marks on the hull, which were not visible to the naked eye. And during the observation, which lasted about 30 minutes, the object performed several maneuvers in the sky, executed movements that seemed to defy conventional laws of physics, such as sudden accelerations and abrupt stops, high-speed vertical ascents and descents, and lateral movements without changing orientation. These movements left the witnesses perplexed about the nature of this technology that was being used. The Adamski incident also was particularly striking due to the clarity and duration of the observation, as well as the number of witnesses present. Ideal weather conditions, which is, of course, rare in UFO cases, and the detailed description of the object and photographs taken by Adamski contributed to making this incident an important case study for ufologists and skeptics. Now, George Adamski, the main witness of this event, provided a detailed account of his experiences with a purported extraterrestrial spaceship and its occupant. According to Adamski, November 20th, 1952, he was in the California desert with some friends and observed a large flying saucer-shaped object that landed not far from him. He described the object as having a metallic brightness with a transparent upper dome through which he could see silhouettes. After a few moments, a door opened and a being emerged from the ship, which Adamski described as being resembling a human with perfect beauty, with long hair and fitted clothes made of an unknown material. The extraterrestrial, who, as I said, Adamski said was Orthon, allegedly communicated with him telepathically, sharing messages of peace and warning of dangers associated with the use of nuclear energy. The other witnesses present, including Alice Wells and Lucy McGinnis, confirmed as having seen a strange object, but weren't close enough to observe the direct encounter between Adamski and the entity. However, they did attest to Adamski's excitement and seriousness when he returned to him after the incident. Wells mentioned having seen Adamski talking to a figure near the ship, although too far away to distinguish any details. Another witness, George Hunt Williamson, who was also present that day, claimed to have observed strange footprints in the ground near where the ship would have landed. These footprints, according to Williamson, had unknown symbols that could be related to extraterrestrial language. Williamson also took Cassidy's footprints, which he later used to support Adamski's account. In addition to these direct testimonies, photographs taken by Adamski of the flying objects have been widely circulated. Although the images have been subject to controversy, the accusations of falsification, they remain an integral part of Adamski's incident file. Critics argue that the photographs could be hoaxes, while Adamski's supporters consider them as tangible proof of his experience. Well, the investigation into Adamski's incident began shortly after he made his experience public. Military authorities, notably the U.S. Air Force, quickly showed their interest in Adamski's accounts, mainly because of the national security implications that the presence of unknown craft in the American airspace could entail. Project Blue Book, the Air Force program tasked with studying unidentified aerial phenomena, took the initiative to collect and analyze information related to this incident. The initial stages of the investigation involved detailed interviews with Adamski himself, and investigators examined his claims about encountering a spaceship and a being he described as coming from Venus. Adamski provided photographs of the ship he claimed to have taken during the incident. These images were meticulously analyzed by Air Force photography experts who sought to identify signs of falsification or features that could corroborate his version of the events. In parallel, witnesses who were present during the incident who had observed the usual phenomena from the region at that time were also questioned. These testimonies were crucial to corroborate or refute his statements. However, the accounts are often contradictory or lack precise details, making it difficult for investigators to draw definitive conclusions. Authorities also consulted scientists and aerospace experts to assess the plausibility of the technology described by Adamski. The descriptions of the spacecraft and its flight capabilities were compared to the technological knowledge at a time to determine if they could be technically feasible without resorting to non-earthly technology. As the investigation progressed, of course, attention also turned to Adamski's personality and motivations. Investigators explored his past, previous activities, and potential affiliations to understand if he could have reasons to fabricate such a story. And this part of the investigation revealed that Adamski had a long-standing interest in occultism and ufology, which raised questions about the credibility of his claims. Despite the efforts made, the official investigation was unable to provide a definitive explanation or conclusively validate any of Adamski's claims. Conclusions of military and government reports tend to be cautious, indicating that while some photographic evidence and testimonies were deemed intriguing, there wasn't enough evidence to confirm the existence of extraterrestrial visitors or advanced technologies. The investigators also noted that the evidence could be interpreted in several ways. Adamski's claims, though fascinating, lack sufficient independent corroboration to be accepted as facts. One of the most debated theories is that of a deliberate hoax. Some skeptics argue Adamski's may have fabricated the entire game for fame or financial gain. They point out inconsistencies in his account and a lack of tangible evidence, such as clear photographs or independent corroborating testimony. And moreover, critics highlight the fact that Adamski was a skilled storyteller, had a clear interest in the occult and paranormal phenomena before his alleged encounters, which would indicate a predisposition to fabricating extraordinary stories. Another theory suggests that Adamski may have been the victim of hallucinations or delusions, possibly due to undiagnosed psychological disorders. This hypothesis is supported by the fact that he described extremely precise and complex details of extraterrestrial technologies and civilizations, which could in fact be the result of a hyperactive imagination combined with an altered mental state. But this theory doesn't take into account the many followers and witnesses who claim to have seen unidentified flying objects and even extraterrestrials in the company of Adamski. And the third perspective suggests that Adamski's narratives could be a form of metaphor or allegory, reflecting his own utopian ideals about society and humanity. According to this view, the peaceful and advanced aliens he described could be symbolize a longing for a better world. Oh, please. This interpretation is often adopted by those who see Adamski not as a liar, but rather an idealist, using the narrative of aliens as a means to promote values of universal peace and harmony. And finally, there's a minority who consider Adamski's claims potentially credible, or at least worthy of examination. These individuals, often ufologists or researchers in paranormal phenomena, argue that certain elements of his stories, such as the description of the spacecraft or certain astronomical knowledge he possessed, were too advanced for the time to be simply invented. They suggest that even if some aspects of his story could be embellished, there might be a kernel of truth in his encounter, maybe linked to phenomena still unexplained. And each of these theories has its supporters and detractors. And the debate around the Adamski incident continues to be a subject of fascination and controversy in the field of ufology and even beyond. Discussions continue on forums and books and conferences, each trying to unravel the mystery of what George Adamski really experienced or claimed to have experienced more than 70 years ago. Well, from the desert of California, let's go to Kinross, Michigan. Kinross Air Force Base incident. There was a mysterious disappearance during a UFO interception. Now, located in the state of Michigan, Kinross Air Force Base was a strategic point for the air defense of the United States during the Cold War. November 23, 1953, an unusual event occurred involving the mysterious disappearance of a U.S. Air Force fighter plane and its pilot, First Lieutenant Felix Moncla. That day, an unidentified flying object was detected by the radar at Kinross Air Base. Faced with this unexplained detection, a F-89C Scorpion fighter plane, piloted by Moncla, accompanied by radar operator Robert Wilson, was dispatched to intercept and identify the object. Communications between the plane and the base were normal until the radar showed Moncla's plane had merged with the unidentified objects on the screen, after which contact was lost. Despite intense searches and investigations, neither plane nor the bodies of the crew members ever found, which left behind a mystery that endures to this day. On November 23rd, 1953, this unusual event occurred in the skies above Lake Superior, near Kinross Air Force Base, which is in Michigan. On that day, the weather conditions were relatively clear with moderate visibility, although low clouds had formed over the lake, making visibility variable at times. It was 6:22 p.m. local time when an unidentified object was detected by the radar of the air defense system. The object was moving at a speed with flight characteristics that didn't match any known aircraft at the time. The detected object was circular or oval in shape, according to the radar operating reports. It seemed to move at a constant speed and suddenly accelerated inexplicably before slowing down again. Its size wasn't clearly established, but estimates based on radar readings suggested it was larger than a conventional aircraft. The color and texture of the object could be determined due to the lack of direct visibility and reliance on radar estimates for tracking. Well, in response to this mysterious appearance, an F-89C Scorpion jet fighter piloted by Lieutenant Felix Moncla, Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson's radar operator, was dispatched to intercept and identify the object. The Scorpion was a very advanced fighter aircraft for the time, and it took off from the air base and headed toward the position indicated by the radar. As the plane approached the object, ground observers closely watched the radar screens, noting the two signals, that of the plane and the unidentified objects, began to converge. At a certain point, the radar signals from the plane and the object overlapped. It seemed the plane was about to reach the UFO, at least pass very close. However, instead of two distinct signals separating after the maneuver, there was only one signal left on the radar. And that phenomenon lasted a few moments before the single signal completely vanished from the radar screen. Well, the incident took place in the area of Lake Superior that was notoriously difficult for search and rescue operators due to its deep, often turbulent waters. The disappearance of the radar signal caused great concern among the base staff and immediately triggered a search operation. Despite intense efforts, neither the plane nor its occupants were ever found. An unidentified object was no longer detected on any subsequent radar. This incident remains one of the most enigmatic and discussed cases in the annals of UFO sightings, mainly due to the unexplained disappearance of the plane and its pilots, as well as the absence of debris or any other physical evidence confirming a crash or a close encounter. The precise detail of the observed object and the exact circumstances of disappearance remain a mystery, fueling various theories and speculations among researchers and the public. According to the testimony of the ground radar operators, the unidentified object was moving at a speed with maneuvers that didn't correspond with those of any conventional aircraft. The operators observed on their screens that the blip representing the F-89 approached the object and the two signals merged into a single signal. After this merger, the single blip continued its path before completely vanishing from the radar. Lieutenant Wilson from the plane radioed they were approaching the object, trying to visualize it, but shortly after that, communication was cut off. No other message was received from the plane. Efforts to reestablish contact with the F-89 were in vain, and the plane and its occupants both disappeared. Intensive searches have been conducted involving ships and planes from the Coast Guard, but no debris from the missing planes ever been located. Weather conditions were good at the time of the incident. Nothing in the visual flight profile of the plane explained such a disappearance. Testimonies of the radar operators who were interviewed separately all corroborated the same sequence of events. They described the object as initially stationary, then it began to move at a high speed, performing abrupt maneuvers that defied the capabilities of any aircraft at the time. The case was officially attributed to an unknown cause by the Air Force, and despite various theories, no satisfactory explanation has been provided as to the nature of the object or the fate of Lieutenant Moncla and Lieutenant Wilson. Testimonies of the radar operators remain the only concrete clues as to what might have happened that day, fielding speculation and theory about encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena. Initial investigation was conducted by the Air Defense Command, which immediately launched a search and rescue operation to find the missing plane and its pilot, First Lieutenant Felix Moncla, as well as the radar operator, Lieutenant Robert Wilson. Despite intensive searches involving planes and ships, no debris from the planes ever found, and the unidentified objects that have been detected on the radar have vanished from the screens without any explanation. The initial reports from military authorities suggest the plane may have been the victim of a collision or a malfunction, but no concrete evidence was ever found to support those theories. Testimonies collected from the radar operators at the base indicated the unidentified objects in the fighter plane seemed to simply merge on the radar before completely disappearing, which of course added a layer of mystery to the incident. In the face of a lack of clear answers and increasing pressure from the public and the media, Air Force tasked Project Blue Book, its official UFO study program, with conducting a more thorough investigation. Investigators from Blue Book examined radar data, interviewed additional witnesses, and analyzed the weather and aeronautical conditions of the day in question. But the final report from Blue Book concluded the incident was unresolved, citing a lack of physical evidence and the simultaneous disappearance of the plane and the UFO as the main obstacles to a definitive conclusion. Over the years, the Kinross incident has remained a subject of speculation and theory among ufologists and paranormal researchers. Many suggesting the plane may have simply been absorbed or destroyed by the UFO. But despite the numerous theories, no concrete evidence has emerged to support these claims, and the incident remains one of the many unresolved cases in the archives of Project Blue Book. The investigation into the Kinross incident highlighted the challenges associated with understanding and interpreting encounters with UFOs, as well as the limitations of the technology of the time to track and analyze this phenomenon. Despite the efforts made by the Air Force and other agencies, the disappearance of the F-89 Scorpion and its occupants remains an unsolved mystery, leaving ongoing questions about what really happened that day over Lake Superior. One of the most widespread theories is that the instrumentation or radar error, which couldn't account for the plane disappearing, but then again, we're talking about the Air Force. Some aviation radar technology experts suggest the equipment at the time was not as reliable as today, which could lead to erroneous readings. According to this hypothesis, what the radar detected as a UFO would have been a ghost echo or a technical problem, and Michael's plane could have crashed due to pilot disorientation or mechanical failure unrelated to the UFO. Another popular theory, of course, is that of extraterrestrial intervention. Speculations fueled by testimonies and reports describing flying objects that were seemingly impossible aeronautical capabilities at the time. According to proponents of this theory, Michael's plane could have been captured or destroyed by the UFO during the interception attempt. This idea is often reinforced by accounts of UFO wreckage recovery and unknown technologies, although these accounts are generally unverified and controversial. The third hypothesis concerns a possible confusion or military misunderstanding. It is suggested that the object Michael was supposed to intercept could have been a spy plane or an experimental drone not recognized by radars as being an American craft. In the climate of the Cold War, tests to new equipment were common and often secret, which could explain the lack of recognition and subsequent confusion that led to a tragic accident. Some researchers also put forward the idea there was a government cover-up. This theory suggests the details of the incident were deliberately obscured by the authorities to hide sensitive information, maybe related to secret military tests or encounters with unexplained phenomena. Supported this theory point to inconsistencies in official reports and absence of found debris, which, according to them, indicates a desire for concealment. Finally, less common explanation sometimes discussed is that of an atmospheric or geophysical anomaly. Lake Superior is known for its sometimes extreme weather conditions and unusual natural phenomena. Some scientists and meteorologists suggest that phenomena such as mirages or San Elmo's fire or magnetic anomalies could have been misinterpreted as UFO activities, led to leading to fatal confusion for the pilot. Of course, none of that explains what happened to the pilot. Well, let's go to Kentucky. August 21st, 1955, the Kelly-Hopkinsville incident. On that date, in the small rural town of Kelly, near Hopkinsville, Kentucky, one family had a terrifying experience that ever marked the community and paranormal phenomena researchers. That evening, after a quiet day, the Sutton family, comprised of several adults and children, returned to their isolated farm. Shortly after dark, about dusk, their tranquility was interrupted by the appearance of strange little creatures. These beings, described as having large pointed ears, bulging and shining eyes, and skin similar to that of metallic silver, seemed to come straight out of a sci-fi movie. The family barricaded themselves in the house, claiming the creatures trying to get in. What followed was a long and distressing night where the Suttons had to defend their home against these unknown visitors. This incident quickly attracted the attention of the media and the researchers, but despite the investigations, there's still a whole lot of unanswered questions. Was it a mistake? Was it wild animals? Was it a hoax or something more mysterious? The Kelly-Hopkinsville incident continues to fascinate and mystify, and remains a prominent case in UFO studies. Now, it was about 7 p.m. when Billy Ray Taylor, one of the residents of the Sutton farm, went out to draw water from the well located outside the house. At this moment, he saw a bright object in the sky. And according to what he said, the object had a round shape, emitted a multicolored glow, crossing the sky at incredible speed before suddenly disappearing behind a grove of trees not far from the house. Intrigued, but also frightened, he went back inside the house, informing the other occupants of what he had seen. Shortly after he went back inside the house, occupants of the house began to hear strange noises outside. Curious and somewhat anxious, of course, Taylor and another man, Elmer and Lucky Sutton, decided to investigate. To their surprise, they were confronted with a small creature about a meter tall with oversized arms and rushing to its body. Clawed hands and oversized head. Creature's skin seemed to have a metallic texture in the dim light. But the conditions that night were clear with a few clouds, making visual observations relatively easy despite the darkness of the countryside without any public lighting. The moon was almost full, providing natural light that helped to distinguish shapes and movements in the dark. Faced with an unexplained apparition, Sutton and Taylor panicked, ran back in the house to grab their guns. Armed, they went back outside where they saw the creature approaching the house, floating rather than walking, which added to the strangeness of the situation, of course. So they did what anybody would do in that situation. They opened fire several times, but the bullets seemed to bounce off or be otherwise ineffective against the creature. It was temporarily retreated into the darkness. Over the following hours, several other similar creatures appeared around the house, seeming to float through the fields, and sometimes they would perch on the roof or peer through the windows. Occupants of the house continued to resist, using firearms and barricading themselves inside. Confrontation lasted until the hours of the morning when the creatures finally disappeared. Detailed description of the creatures and the objects observed by Taylor at Kelly fueled many theories and speculations, but no definitive explanations have ever been established. That evening, in a farm near Kelly in Hopkinsville, in Kentucky, several members of the same family, as well as friends who were present, reported having seen and interacted with mysterious creatures. Now, as I said, Billy Ray Taylor was the first to report an anomaly. As he was drawing water from the well, which was located outside the house, he saw what he described as a flying saucer with multicolored lights. He said it crossed the sky to finally disappear behind a line of trees right near the farm. He was excited, of course, and somewhat scared, and went back to the house to inform the others what he had seen, and they, of course, were skeptical. Shortly after his return indoors, the family and their friends began to hear strange noises and see shadows moving around the outside of the house. It was then that Lucky Sutton, the main tenant of the house, spotted a strange creature looking in the window. He described it as being about a meter tall with long, thin arms, clawed hands, pointed ears, large, bright eyes, and skin that seemed to have a metallic hue under the moonlight. Well, as I said, Lucky and Billy Ray grabbed guns and began shooting at what they believed to be assailants. According to their accounts, the creatures seemed to float instead of walk when hit by bullets, and they emitted a metallic sound as if the projectiles were bouncing off metal. Lynette Langford, the matriarch of the Sutton family, also testified to the presence of the creatures. She described a scene where several entities seemed to gather around the house, appearing curious but not aggressive. She recounted what the creatures had large ears, which were the most distinctive features, and their movements were jerky, almost mechanical. During the night, the confrontation continued with several attempts by the creatures being made to enter the house, which were repelled by gunfire. This series of events lasted several hours until the family decided to leave the house as a group to seek help at the local police station. Well, the testimonies from that night were corroborated by the police officers who visited the farm after the incident. They saw signs of damage caused by the shots, and there was an atmosphere of fear among the witnesses. Although skeptical at first, the officers couldn't ignore the sincerity and obvious distress of the Suttons and their friends. Investigation into the Kelly-Hopkinsville incident began immediately after local authorities were alerted by the residents of the Sutton farm. On August 21st, 1955, several members of the Sutton family were adamant they saw an unidentified object land near their property, followed by encounters with small, strange creatures. Testimonies of the family members and neighbors quickly attracted the attention of the local and national authorities. First responders to the scene, of course, were the police officers from Christian County. They were joined by representatives of the Kentucky State Police. This latter group conducted detailed interviews with the witnesses who described the creatures as being about 3 feet tall, large ears, bright eyes, and thin bodies. The witnesses also reported the creatures seemed to float instead of walk, and they were extremely fast. In response to the extraordinary nature of the claims, the American military, most notably from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is their base, were consulted. Military investigators visited the Sutton farm to examine the site and search for physical evidence of a UFO landing. While the military found traces and impacts that seemed to indicate unusual activity, no conclusive evidence was publicly reported. Investigations also involved scientists and ufologists to examine the testimonies and physical evidence. Investigators tried to determine if the experience could be explained by natural phenomena or misunderstandings. However, despite efforts being made, no definitive explanation was ever found. The conclusions of the military and the government authorities were cautious, of course, indicating there was not enough evidence to support the existence of extraterrestrials or an unidentified flying object. Nevertheless, the incident continued to be a subject of fascination and speculation, fueling the debate about the possible presence of extraterrestrials and how governments handle information relating to UFOs. Testimonies collected during the investigation were widely disseminated and analyzed over the following years. Members of the Sutton family in particular were in the spotlight, some suggesting their story might have been influenced by cultural phenomena or media pressure. But they maintained their claims, adding a layer of mystery and complexity to the whole affair. So in summary, the investigation into the Kelly-Hopkinsville incident failed to provide a clear explanation and left many questions unanswered. The interactions between the witnesses, local authorities, military investigators, and researchers have created a complex narrative that continues to be studied by researchers in paranormal and UFO phenomena. First theory, of course, is that of an extraterrestrial visitation. According to this hypothesis, the observed creatures were from another planet or another dimension. This idea is supported by the description of the creatures: small in size, large ears, bulging eyes, and skin that seem to reflect daylight. Proponents of this theory argue that the movements and behaviors of the creature, as well as their unusual appearance, don't correspond to any known animal on Earth. Another popular explanation, of course, is that the whole thing was a hoax or maybe a misunderstanding. Some skeptics suggest that witnesses may have misinterpreted wild animals such as owls under the influence of fear and confusion. Yeah. Large eyes and nocturnal behavior of the owls could have been misinterpreted as those of extraterrestrial entity. And, moreover, psychological tensions amplified by rural isolation and local legends about supernatural creatures could have played a role in the witness's perception of the events. And there's a third theory concerning psychological and sociological phenomena. Some researchers believe the incident could be a case of sleep paralysis or hypnagogic hallucinations. Individuals between the state of wakefulness and sleep see intruders in their immediate environment. These conditions could be exacerbated by stress or fear, of course. Furthermore, the impact of the media and the science fiction films at the time could have influenced the witnesses, predisposing them to interpret ambiguous stimuli as being of extraterrestrial origin. A fourth theory is that of secret military experimentation. Some ufologists and conspiracy theories suggest the incident could be the result of an undisclosed government test involving advanced technology or chemical substances that would have caused hallucinations or altered perceptions in the witnesses. And this theory, of course, is reinforced by the context of the Cold War, a period during which many secret tests were conducted by the American government. And finally, there are those who consider the Kelly-Hopkinsville incident as an event still unexplained, possibly due to a combination of several factors. This multidimensional approach suggests that the complex interaction between the environment, the psychology of the witnesses, and the Possible external influences could have created a unique experience that is difficult to strictly categorize into a single box. Of course, the mere fact that shots were exchanged was, of course, poo-pooed and overlooked. Could still have been a weather balloon that walks and has big ears. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk about more documented UFO incidents. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.